Here we are in Helsinki, where a young generation of architects developed this extraordinary approach to their idea of Art Nouveau. This was Jugendstil, a movement that transformed ordinary buildings into complete works of art. In this film, we step inside the city's most iconic examples, exploring interiors rich with symbolism, craftsmanship, and national pride. As the Art Nouveau style spread across parts of Europe at the end of the 19th century, Finland was still under Russian rule. But a growing national spirit was stirring, and Helsinki sought a new identity. The young architects of Helsinki sought to create something distinctly Finnish. And so, architecture became a canvas, not just for the imagination, it was also political, and to do with independence and pride. And nowhere is this story clearer than in Helsinki's enchanted streets of Katajanokka, where apartment blocks rise like fantastical castles. Together, they form one of the world's most unified and dramatic visions of Art Nouveau. So in a city which quadrupled its size in a matter of years, one of the great architectural problems for Helsinki was residential. The problem was solved by developing whole areas for housing, and the Helsinki population developed these extraordinary apartment blocks. And the blocks themselves became an experiment in the new style. But what's interesting is that there was a very different approach in residential from the commercial buildings that were going up in the centre. And in this building, the Pohjola Insurance Building, we can see a great example, which found beauty in the strength of material, in stone that tells stories. It is important to remember that the Art Nouveau style is not just one look, one visual approach to things. Art Nouveau itself is really a collection of movements, each one growing up in different areas of Europe, in different cities, and each of those cultures gave Art Nouveau a slightly different look and stretched it in different directions. And in this city, Helsinki, one of the powerful things that comes over is in their use of nature and in their use of mythology and symbolism and pulling the two together. And there was a volume of poems called the Kalevala, which came right to the fore, right across the arts, in music, in literature, and powerfully in painting, sculpture, and in architecture. And the myths and legends of the Kalevala came to represent the Finnish people. And this building, the Pohjola building, is covered in the animals and monsters from the Kalevala. As we look at the building, it's rather frightening. They brought together creatures from the past and fused them into natural forms and brought them together. It's as though the Finnish identity is to do with the forest, inhabited by creatures of all kinds. Natural creatures like bears and wolves and owls, but also mythic creatures like trolls and gargoyles. Perhaps one way to understand Finnish Art Nouveau and to get inside how the architects and designers were thinking is in nature and the use of nature. Often very stylized, but as you look at the woodwork here, the top end of the woodwork and the metalwork, it's stylized trees, and frequently the pattern forms come out of their vision of the forest, a stylized forest. And the Pohjola building, being built quite early on, 1899 to 1901, was one of the early masterpieces of GLS, their greatest architectural practice. The trio of Gerselius, Lindgren and Saarinen, known as GLS, defined the movement. that will become one of the most influential creative collaborations in Finnish history. But perhaps their most personal creation was Vitrésk, the studio home they designed for themselves, part workspace, part artistic refuge. It was a manifesto, a living demonstration of how Finnish identity, nature, craftsmanship and modern design could be woven together into something entirely new. So while this place feels in many ways quite traditional, it's vernacular, this idea very much comes from the English arts and crafts movement and the idea of the vernacular, of looking at folk art and traditional building and bringing that into the modern age. There's not a great deal of stone here, it's mainly designed out of wood, but overridingly is the idea of Gesamtkunstwerk, of total work of art, whereby you take all the different architectural and design and artistic practices and bring them together. The house is full of wood, metal, stained glass, glass, ceramic, textile, integrated in to create a single interior, the total work of art. They're all directed at solving the problem of what the building has to do. The thing that's interesting about GLS, this practice, is that each building appears to be really very different from the others they did. For the National Museum, they sought not only to house history, but to make the building become history itself. Rooted in the land, yet looking towards the future, combining craftsmanship with myth and modernity with memory. Across the stone surface, subtle carvings and motifs evoke the mythic imagery of the Kalevala. Animals, plants, and abstract patterns weave through the structure like living symbols. Even inside, high above, the great ceiling frescoes bring myth to life. Scenes from the Kalevala unfold across the vault. Heroes, spirits, forest and skies rendered in colour and movement. The result is both monumental and intimate, a harmony between nature, craftsmanship and myth. This building by HENI Talks wasn't just a theatre, it was a cultural symbol, created at a moment when Finnish Jugendstil architects were shaping a new national identity through design. Completed in 1902, is one of the great monuments of Finland's Art Nouveau age. A silhouette that looks more like a fortress of folklore than a theatre. But actually, when you go inside the building, there's another major theme which also reflects the Finnish mentality. Fantastic stained glass. The geometric patterns of the stained glass windows echo Finnish folk art and medieval storytelling. More than decoration, these windows shape the building's atmosphere. Warm, solemn, and quietly theatric. As daylight filters through them, the entire foyer becomes a living artwork. Patterns of colour and texture animate the entrance hall, casting shifting tones across the stone and wood surfaces as the day moves on. The stained glass echoes the ideals of the movement, craftsmanship, myth, and the belief that art should be woven into everyday public life. Another of the great pioneering architects was Lars Sonck, a bold and imaginative architect whose work bridged tradition and modernity. Sonck was fascinated by Finland's vernacular architecture, alive with movement, ornament and expression. The Jugend hall speaks of movement, the flowing line, the living curve, the artistry of craft. It's a building born from the belief that architecture could be both functional and poetic. Another feature of the work of Lars Sonck, and it shows that he was in tune with the other major architects in Helsinki, is embracing of the idea of Gesamtkunstwerk, a total work of art, where multiple arts are brought together to orchestrate and create the architectural environment. And perhaps the single biggest feature in this space is the magnificent mural at the back end of what would have been the foyer of the bank.
The mural, painted in 1916, transforms the space from an impressive architectural shell into a living canvas. It connects the viewer to nature whilst being in the heart of the city, and it reminds us that architecture is never just stone and timber. It is a stage for human expression, for culture, for life itself. And in the Jugend Hall, the mural stands as proof that art and architecture together can elevate a space, turning a building into a lasting symbol of the city's soul. As we look around throughout the building, we can see painted ornamentation along walls, under arches and on the pillars and vaults, animal figures, some comic, some wild, carved in soapstone and granite, deep reliefs. The ceiling vault of the main hall is like a Viking ship turned upside down in its structural inspiration. And Sonck crafts a ceiling like none other for his next masterpiece, the Kallio Church. Sonck designed the interior as a complete artwork. Every lamp, bench and metal detail is part of a unified aesthetic. Carved reliefs line the space, blending the softened curves of Jugendstil with the emerging clarity of Nordic classicism. These motifs reflect Finland's spiritual and natural identity, rendered in a modern, subtly monumental style. The church's rising granite tower, over 60 metres high, is one of Helsinki's most recognisable skyline markers. The heavy, rough-hewn granite exterior ties the building directly to Finland's natural landscape. When Kallio Church opened, it was more than a house of God. It was a declaration that Finland could stand tall and Helsinki's spirit could endure. In this city of islands and forests, where light shifts with the seasons, there stands a building, monumental. The Helsinki Central Railway Station, a living artwork in stone, a landmark that anchors Helsinki's identity. Here, Jugendstil meets granite, light, and the human form in a bold Nordic synthesis. And dominating the skyline is the clock tower, a landmark seen from many parts of the city. Flanking the main entrance are the imposing figures known as the lantern bearers, sculpted by Emil Wikström. Two pairs of powerful male statues hold the spherical lamps, stone men whose stern faces and upright posture seem to guard and guide the travellers. They serve both as ornament and signifier, Arnovo's embrace of human form. Simplified, monumental, symbolic.
I'm stood now at the entrance of one of the most important buildings in Helsinki, the Grand Central Station. It was designed by Saarinen after he left the practice of GLS, but was finally inaugurated in 1919. So we still see some of those elements from the Art Nouveau years, not least in the use of geometry and a far more geometric structure in the overall design. But as we look at it, we can see other things. Two heads behind me are very much a product of what became known as Egyptomania, the influence of ancient Egypt. But also it's to do with Saarinen moving away from nature. Most of his buildings up to now have been covered in animals and plant forms. This building is void of that. If we go inside this building, we realise that the beautiful themes which are developed outside carry all the way through the interior structure.
Stepping inside Helsinki's Central Railway Station is like entering a cathedral of movement and modernity. The first thing visitors notice are the grand spaces, flooded with light from high windows and skylights. Polished granite floors, smooth stone walls, and the carefully proportioned arches give the interior a sense of permanence and solidity, while the soaring ceilings create an atmosphere of openness and anticipation. Every line, every surface communicates order and elegance, guiding travellers naturally through the vast concourse. Walking the halls, one senses Saarinen's vision, a building that is functional, monumental, and yet profoundly welcoming. It is a testament to Finland's confidence in its own identity, and a daily reminder that architecture can shape not only a city, but the experience of everyone who passes through it. Across Europe, Art Nouveau ignited a revolution, and here in Helsinki, Finnish architects answered with something altogether different. A wilder, more rugged, more elemental vision. Granite instead of marble. Nordic myth instead of classical allegory. A language of curving forms and national spirit, carved into the very fabric of the city. These buildings remain more than monuments. They are the moment Finland found its voice, when stone, ornament and imagination combined to declare a new nation to the world. Jugendstil held the past in one hand and the future in the other.